of God. And many of these principles that we're going to talk about are found in the little brochure you're being given. Now, today we're going to emphasize more on the spiritual aspect with some practical application. In the future, we could do more practical, more nitty-gritty, while still including the spiritual. That being said, there will be time for questions and answers, and we will go from there. And so the title of the presentation is Until He Comes, and right there's a lesson, right? As I mentioned in the sermon today, I told you that many people say that have told me that they didn't save for retirement because they thought Jesus was coming in their lifetime. And now they're in retirement and they have no money for retirement. And, they're asking me what to do about it. Well, the Bible tells us to occupy when? Until He comes, right? So we just can't make decisions thinking He's coming in our lifetime. We have to live in a spirit of expectancy, but believing that we're going to live our entire life, right? We have to be ready every day, but we have to plan as if we're going to live our entire life here. So you have to be ready to be raptured, right? As they say, right? You have to be ready to be saved. You have to be right with God every day. But you have to plan as if you're going to live like my grandmother. She lived to 93, passed away. My other grandmother lived to 101, passed away, right? We have to plan, but we have to occupy. And we must be faithful stewards for this life and for what life? Eternity. So here's our first slide. Where's my glasses? I got to put on my superpowers, my glasses. When I was preaching with the kids at Wawoka, every time I put on my superpowers, that's what I called it, they would erupt in applause. So it says, listen to this. No man, and I put myself in brackets, or woman, is excusable for being without what? Financial ability. Of many a man it may be said he is kind, amiable, generous, a good man, even a Christian. But he is not qualified to manage his own business. As far as the outlay of means is concerned, he is a mere child. He has not been brought up by his parents to understand and to practice the principles of self-support. Doesn't matter if he's spiritual. It doesn't matter if he's a great preacher. It doesn't matter if he's a godly man. If he doesn't know how to manage his finances, we're told he's but a mere what? Child. And as we learned in the sermon, that he who doesn't take care of his own household has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. And so no man or woman should be without financial ability. Now, that doesn't mean we have to be a whiz, but we need to know the basic principles of what God has taught us. And so here it says, key principle, financial management is a learned skill. I wasn't born with this skill, right? Christian character alone is not enough. Stewardship requires training, responsibility, and self-support. So it's on everybody here listening to educate yourselves to manage money for God's glory and honor. Now, we said we were going to talk about practical. I'm a Dave Ramsey certified personal coach, and he teaches a lesson called Financial Peace University. Now, Dave Ramsey is not Seventh-day Adventist. Many of the principles you're going to see today were taught by Ellen White. And what that teaches us is that godly principles are no respecter of persons. They will work for the Baptist, for the Presbyterian, for the Catholic, for the Adventist, for the atheist, right, who doesn't believe in God. If they follow godly principles, of finances, they're going to work for them as well. And so we're going to see, the reason I bring up Financial Peace University, because it's an 8 to 9 week course that you guys can do here, where Dave Ramsey teaches the course himself via DVD, and your pastor, all he has to do is facilitate the small group discussions. We're going to do one at Central at sometime in the fall. So I bring this up because he gives us a lot of the practical need. Now, as I mentioned, Dave Ramsey's not Seventh-day Adventist. So he may be a little rough on the edges for some people. But Paul tells us, examine everything, keep that which is good. So we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater simply because he may rub us the wrong way. Take the principles that are practical, that I have used myself to be 100% debt-free, including the mortgage, use those principles and live for the glory and honor of God. So Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University. Here are highlighted the principles he teaches. He teaches about emergency fund, and we're going to talk about that here. He teaches about budget, getting out of debt, saving for the future, investing in retirement, insurance protection, giving generous, and leaving a legacy. All those things he teaches, today I'm going to teach you, but from the pen of Ellen White, to show you that what he's teaching in a practical sense that we can use in our time are found in the pamphlet that you've been given. So when I saw that connection many years ago, I realized that I can listen to his principles and, like anything else, judge it by the word and judge it by the spirit of prophecy. Do I agree with everything he says? The answer is no. But I don't agree with what every Adventist pastor says. And that's my own denomination. Right? So it has to be based on the word of God. And so let's look at the first one. And by the way, some of these quotes are in your, most of these quotes are in your, the ones you'll see here are partial. You'll have the full one there. Listen to what she says. Every week you should lay by in some secure place $5 or $10 not to be used unless in case of sickness. Now this is in the 1800s. I would recommend you save more than $5 or $10 for emergencies. But nevertheless, the principle is there. You have to save for emergency. And it's sadly because the average household, we're told, Dave Ramsey tells us this, the average household cannot meet an emergency of $1,000 without having to get into debt. In other words, they would have to put it on a credit card to meet an emergency of $1,000. And we need to be more secure than that. We need to be able to, save enough money where you have 3 to 6 months emergency fund. In other words, if I lost my job today, I can subsist for 6 months without having to get into debt of paying my bills. Now, granted, I don't have a mortgage anymore. I don't have a car payment. All I would have to worry about is feeding my kids, paying the lights, which is why I can do that with a 6 months emergency fund. It'll last me. This didn't happen overnight. I'll share part of my testimony. When we got married, I was debt-free by 6 months. I had just gotten debt-free. And I married my wife, and she had $159,000 in student loans. Right? So it's not we started with money. We started $159,000 in debt. And so an emergency fund. So if you don't have an emergency fund, Dave Ramsey recommends $1,000 as quick as possible, where you don't touch it for anything but an emergency. Then you got to pay off your debt, not including the mortgage, any other debt. And then once you do that, you can build up to a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So key principle, you got to have an emergency fund. Some of these we'll go through quickly. Next, budgeting and cash flow. I love this next quote. Listen to this. Many, very many, have not so educated themselves that they can keep their expenditures within the limits of their income. They do not learn to adapt themselves to circumstances, and they borrow and borrow again and again and become overwhelmed in debt, and consequently, they become discouraged and disheartened. I knew someone, well, he's still a friend. He's not like this anymore. But there was a period in his life where he was making $40,000 a month and he had no savings. Some people don't make $40,000 a year. He's making $40,000 a month and he had no savings. He wasn't planning for the future. He was just living it up. Nice cars every couple of years, condominiums here and there. He was just, I can afford it. I can make the payment. I can afford it. Now he has wised up, cut back his lifestyle. He's still making great money. He's a partner at a law firm. And so, but more money, when I used to listen to rap music, there was a rapper who used to say, more money, more problems, right? You can get in bigger trouble the more money you have, right? Because you can make bigger mistakes. So we have to learn how to budget our money. And I'm not going to ask this, but you answer this in your own heart. How many of you have a written budget that you check periodically? Right? I have an app called Monarch Money where all my money has a responsibility. This X amount of money, savings. This goes to pay the electric bill. This goes to pay insurance. This goes to pay life insurance. This goes to pay vacation. Every cent of my money has a job to do. Dave Ramsey says, if you don't have a budget, you're going to wonder where your money went. Right? You're going to spend money and realize, where did it all go? If you have a budget, you know exactly where your money is going. Tithe and offering, donations, miscellaneous fund. And to be honest, even though we're debt-free, we're not 100% perfect. We have a fund called Stuff We Didn't Budget For. That's what it's called, literally. Stuff we didn't budget for. And we have to take from savings if, an emergency happened that was out of the blue. Listen, she goes on to say on this subject, all should learn how to keep accounts. Some neglect this work as non-essential, but this is wrong. All expenses should be what? Accurately stated. And you know how people get in trouble? They have a budget, but then their friends say, let's go out. And they don't want to say no, and they don't want to feel like they're fuddy-duddy, and they go out and they blow the budget. Or other times, they don't realize that they just bought 6 donuts at Dunkin' Donuts. And they bought a smoothie at Starbucks. And then they bought a bag of chips in between break. And then little do you know, $50 are gone. And then people wonder why there is no money at the end of the month. It's little things like that. Now, for those of us who may be making a bigger income, the mistakes are 1,000 here or 1,000 there. But it adds up when you realize in the end, there may not be enough money for a vacation or enough money, or you underfunded your retirement. And so budgeting is the key here, because a budget is telling your money where to go, as Dave Ramsey says, instead of wondering where it went. I can tell you where we spent every dime last month, because when it comes into our app, there are apps like Monarch Money, which I just started using this year. I used to use an app called YNAB, You Need a Budget. That's the abbreviation, YNAB, You Need a Budget. There are other apps like that. Or you can do what Dave Ramsey recommends at the beginning if you don't have a budget, a paper budget. But every dollar needs to have a responsibility. Now, here's the one. Get out of debt. All right? She says, this one is really serious. I mean, they're all serious, but look at what she says. You must see that one should not manage his affairs in a way that will incur debt. When one becomes involved in debt, he is in one of Satan's nets, which he sets for the souls. So now we're not just talking about finances, we're talking about your spirituality and your health in spirituality. And I'll use myself as an example. I remember when we were still $159,000 in debt in student loans, I would be sitting ready to preach the sermon, and I would have the enemy whispering, have you paid your student loan yet? Do you really want to send that much money to your student loan? And I would have thoughts about the student loans right before I'm supposed to be preaching. Remember, temptation is not a sin, right? But he had something to use against me at that moment. And let's be frank, when we have a lot of debt, whether it's student loan or car payment or even a mortgage, which is a good thing to have, right? A house. But even then, you have to worry about the outlay of means when you have that hanging over you. And so eliminating debt, sometimes we wonder why we're not growing spiritually, is because the concern we have over our debt. I got to put more overtime, or you're frustrated because you can't do something because you have to pay down the debt. And that wears on you because none of us want to feel like we're just working to pay off something, right? We want to have freedom. Even myself, now that we paid off the mortgage, sometimes I feel still broke because the mortgage wasn't that high, and so it's not really like we have an abundance of cash left over. And so debt affects us spiritually. Here's another one where she says, for the fact that you are in debt weakens your faith and tends to what? Discourage you. So it's not that debt is neutral and you just worry. Debt tends to what? Weaken your faith. I did this question, and I'm not going to do it here, but I did this question, and the reason I did it was because I was doing a seminar similar to this, not exactly this, it was more practical, with a bunch of pastors in Texas Conference they were either new to ministry or they were new to Texas Conference. So these were pastors with less than 2 years in Texas. I told them in a little index card, write down all the amount of debt you have, not including the mortgage. So they took their time. A group of 22 pastors had over $2 million in debt. Most of that being student loans and car payments. Those were the things. So you do the math. 2 million divided over 2 million, like 2.1, divided by 22. That's close to $100,000 of debt each. Now, that was skewed by one pastor who had close to $500,000 in debt. He was a failed medical student, and he took out all that loan, never finished. Now he's in ministry. But to his credit, he came to me years later, and he got out of debt. So it can be done. So the question you have to ask yourself, and to be honest with yourself, not including the mortgage, how much debt do you have? And if we're doing it God's way, then we need to eliminate that debt as quick as possible. As quick as possible. Listen to what she says here. In our use of what? We're talking about money. We can make it an agent of spiritual improvement by regarding it as a sacred trust, not to be employed to administer to pride, vanity, appetite, or passion. Money, we don't often think about it, but is actually very spiritual. In the sermon earlier today, I said, let me see your checkbook, and I will tell you your spirituality. Remember, the sermon was about the fruits. Share your tunic. Share your food. Don't take more than your own, like the tax collector. Don't harass people and be content with your wages. Individuals who are managing money God's way will have an added peace that others do not have. And it's not because they're managing their money, per se. It's because they're seeing the blessings of doing it God's way. I'll give you an example. Somebody who's debt-free, let's say they make $15,000 a year. A month. They're debt-free. Somebody who has $40,000 in debt and they only make $5,000. In that scenario, without knowing more, you would say the person with $15,000 and no debt is doing better than the person with $40,000 only making $5,000. But when you add to the context, they're debt-free, but they're spending it in clubbing, alcohol, drugs, womanizing. And the other person has come to the light and is doing everything they can to be debt-free, returning a faithful tithe, and trusting in God for his finances. With that added context, who's better off? The $40,000 in debt person. So never judge a person strictly by how much debt they have, but is now that they have the light, what are they doing about it? Because I would rather have somebody in debt now finally learning it to do God's way than to have somebody who's completely debt-free and could care less about the glory and honor of God. So debt has to be eliminated. And Dave Ramsey teaches you methods called like the snowball, how to eliminate debt as quickly as possible. This is from the credit company called Experian. And this is by generation the average debt that households have. 18 to 28, about 34,000. Millennials, 29 to 44, that's including mortgages. Generation X, baby boomers, and the silent generation. We have the average American highly in debt. Even if you would take away the mortgage, the average American has anywhere between $20,000 to $40,000 in debt. What could you do for your own household and for the kingdom of God if you were freed from that 40 grand in debt? Right? There's a motivation to go ahead and get out of debt. Most debt, as you see here, is credit card debt. Dave Ramsey is 100% against owning a credit card. Cut it up. He teaches people. I don't go that far. Right? I don't go that far. But if you cannot pay off your credit cards every month, then you have a problem. And you should not have a credit card. Because then you're paying exorbitant interest rates. You know, how much interest rate can you get at a bank? Somebody give me a number. Throw out a number. What's not much? Max, right? That's a high savings account, 4%. You know who gets higher than that? The credit card company. They make anywhere between 21 to 34% on your money when you don't pay off your credit cards. Think about that. Dave Ramsey makes a joke. Your house is this big? How big is the bank? Right? And it's because interest rate on credit cards are anywhere, you know, sometimes they lure people in. Oh, 0% interest credit card for a year. But then when you see the number after year, anywhere between 21, I've seen as high as 37% for credit cards. And then we wonder why we don't have money. So then credit cards with balance, auto loans, mortgages, personal loans, HELOCs, which is a home equity loan of credit, and student loans are killing us. So before we go to the other side of the slide here, so we learned we have to have an emergency fund. We learned we have to tell our money where to go instead of wondering where it went, and that's called a budget. Then you have to eliminate debt. It's harder to swim when you have, 40 pounds attached to you, right? And so we have to eliminate debt. Then we get to invest and plan for retirement. Every week, she says, you should lay by in some secure place $5 or $10. Obviously, that's more now. Not to be used unless in case of sickness. With economy, you may place something at interest. With wise management, you can save something after paying your debts. And Dave Ramsey teaches this. You should not be investing for retirement until you get out of debt. It shouldn't be one money to debt and one money to retirement. Eliminate the debt as fast as possible, and then you can save more for retirement. Listen to this one. She says, old and young frequently expend means for candies and other hurtful indulgences and for dainties of which they have no real need. Let them put the same amount into these savings banks the coming years, and they will be surprised at the result. They will find quite a sum which represents that which they have thoughtlessly squandered to please the taste and gratified pride. When they had practiced self-denial, they would have had for benevolent purposes an amount just double of that which they have saved. Now I'm going to ask you a serious question that I've never asked anybody when I've done this seminar or seminars like it. So this is a question. How many of us truly believe what we teach about the United States of America in Revelation 13? Revelation 13. Raise your hand. Truly believe it. Raise your hand. Okay, not everybody's raising their hand. Okay, but all right. For those of us who truly believe it, in practical purposes, this is what it means. The United States will be the lone superpower or the preeminent superpower until Christ comes back in glory. Yes or no? Right? In other words, close of probation will happen, and the United States will be leading the charge of what we have preached will happen in Revelation 13. So that tells me from a financial standpoint that America is still going to be around when Christ comes back. That means mutual funds like the S&P 500 will still be making money for people right up to it all goes downhill. And once it all goes downhill, we don't need to worry about our money because we're going home. Does that make sense? So if that makes sense, I don't understand why, and I'm going to pick on minorities here, of which I am, why we're so afraid of investing in the stock market. Because that's the only way you're going to retire in the United States is to have money invested in your 401k, your 403b, or in some other form of retirement like IRA or Roth IRA. If we truly believe Revelation 13, that America's going to be around, in order for you to ultimately lose all your money, the top 500 companies in the world will have to go bankrupt. And that's what the S&P 500 represents. Apple, Microsoft, Home Depot, Walmart, Lowe's, they would all have to go bankrupt and zero for you to lose your retirement investment. And that's why, I teach this. And she says, right, you can have double. So I'm going to show you an example. Young people, pay attention. He uses this example, Jake and Blake. So Jake starts investing about $2,400 a year, and he starts at 21 and stops investing at 30. Never puts another dime. Done. His brother, Blake, starts investing. He waits till 30, and then he puts money all the way up to 68. Look who still has more money in the end. Jack does. Edwin, start young. Start now. It's never too late for us, older folk. I didn't start till 37, and I'll be able to retire. But I had to put more money than $2,400 a year away. A lot more money to try to catch up to this and more. But this is called the power of compounding interest. And could you save more if you didn't have debt? You bet you can. And now it gets even better, because this is an older example. Look, I don't know the official name of it, so I'm not trying to get political here. But Trump introduced a savings account for kids. Not for adults, for kids. That you can put money away for your kids that grows interest-free without them having to work. See, in a Roth IRA and a regular IRA, the kid had to work, and he could only, if he only made $600, that's all he could put in. But there's an official name for it, but they nickname it the Trump account, that has opened up, but you can't start investing till July 4th, where you could put in money for your kids that grows tax-free. And if you start them now, as I'm starting my daughters, 11, 8, and 5, with the amount of money I'm going to put in for them, by the time they're 40, they'll be millionaires. Because now with this Trump account, they don't have to be working. I could put in the money for them. An aunt, an uncle. You know, kids get birthday money all the time. If they get $50, take 15 of that, put it in the account, and let them play with the other 35. Right? So there's no excuse for our generation to build generational wealth if we do it God's way. Remember the verse during the sermon. The wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. That's the grandkids. And you can change their life now. And if your kid was born, how old is this young man there? How old is he? What year was he born? Do we know? Okay, I don't know the age, but I think it's 1 or 2. I think it's either 1 or 2. Trump. What happened? I think it's 1 or 2. If you're 1 or 2 years old, the Trump account gives you $1,000 to start. And if you're a little older than that, I think they give you $250. So that's free money you could be claiming for your children. I think if it's 1 or 2 years old, they give you $1,000. And if it's another certain age, they give you $250. Free money. It'd be a waste not to take it. And then it grows, and then you could keep contributing, and it grows tax-free for the duration of their life. Remember, we spoke about interest rate. The credit cards get 30-something% if you don't pay on time. And I said earlier, the only way you're going to retire is in the stock market. Well, the S&P 500 throughout its entirety has averaged between 10 and 12%. So I put 11 here, put it in the middle. You can't get that in the bank. He said 4%, but that's probably a CD, certificate of depression, what Dave Ramsey calls it. But your regular savings accounts are like 1.2%. And this is where Hispanics, I don't know about Kenyan community, but Hispanics, they're afraid of the stock market. It's a scam and da-da-da. The S&P 500, it's the top 500 companies in the United States. And if they all go bankrupt, we're going home. Jesus is coming. So don't think that way. Now look at this. What was yesterday? What holiday was celebrated yesterday? Juneteenth. The stock market was closed yesterday. So the chart I'm going to show you is from Thursday, June 18th. It's an actual chart from my account. I own this mutual fund. It's an S&P 500 mutual fund. Remember 11%? Hopefully you could see this. The last 15 years, it's averaged 14.59%. The last 10 years, it's averaged 15.62%. The last 5 years, remember, we had COVID in between the 10 and the 5 years ago. 14.8%. 3 years, the last 3 years, it's averaged 20.96%. And last year, it did 26.89%. That means in 1 year, $100 made $26.89. Where else are you going to get that type of interest rate? Not in your mattress. Not sending it back home to Kenya, or in my case, people send money to the Dominican Republic or Peru. Not in your regular CD that pays like 4 or 5%. If you had $100,000 in the S&P 500, last year you made $26,000 doing nothing. Just parking your money there. And then compound, right? Then the next year, let's say you did it 3 years ago. You had 100,000 and 120,000, right? Because it says 20%, 120,000. But then the next year it averaged another 20, so now you have like 160. And then the next year, 26, now you have close. And you see how this adds up? But we have to be like the turtle. Slow and steady. Dave Ramsey recommends anywhere between 10 to 15% of your income towards retirement. Before the check even comes home, tell your 401k, your 403b, take the money out and put it into my retirement. And then you budget on the rest. That's what my wife and I do. We don't even see that money. It just goes straight into our retirement. And look at the returns. These are, if you look, it's too small, but right there, anybody can come up and look at June 18th, 2026, the last day the market was closed. And so far this year, it's averaged halfway through the year 10.15%. It is possible. And if we believe that America is going to be around until Jesus comes, then there should be no fear of the market. Remember, God never told you to give him all your money. God says to return a faithful tithe and offering, and then the rest need to be managed for his glory and honor. But that includes your retirement, being wise to leave your children's children an inheritance, to leave a legacy behind, to take care of your family, to make sure they have proper clothing, proper housing, proper food, proper nutrition, right? It's not about God wanting all your money. He's saying, trust me with all of it. Manage it as my steward for the glory and honor of God, and I will make you the head and not the tail. Amen? So that's a real-world example of that mutual fund I own, SWPPX, which is a S&P 500 mutual fund. Now here's one, life insurance. Now, there's one objection that I get from Seventh-day Adventists about life insurance. It's a quote from the Spirit of Prophecy about life insurance, and I'm going to put it up just to show you that I'm not unaware of the quote. She says, I was shown the Seventh-day Adventists should not engage in life insurance. This is a commerce with the world which God does not approve. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Right? But like anything else, you have to understand the context of her time and the context of what she was saying. Before I explain the context, I do want to share another quote from the GC speaking about this. She said, they say, today's life insurance industry is heavily regulated by law and government agencies, differs in important ways from that of the late 1800s. Ellen White's counsel against investing in life insurance must be understood against the background and practices of her time, if the meaning of her words is to be properly understood. Before I give you that, remember the example where she talks about we shouldn't own bicycles. How many of you have a bicycle? Okay, some of you do, right? So what was she saying about a bicycle? The context and the principle behind a bicycle is that even if I had the money, I would not be owning a Bugatti or a Lamborghini, right? Because that is a vanity display of a Toyota can take me the same place, right? So in her time, the life insurance industry was pure speculation. The companies did not have the money if there was a major disaster to pay everybody. So basically, you were sending money, never knowing if you would ever, be paid should something happen to you. But if you look at her counsel, when it comes to insuring buildings, she was for it. Why? Because that industry was more reflective of our industry today. Well, the life insurance industry has totally changed. And there are two types of life insurance, though, that we need to talk about. One of it is called whole life insurance. And if I ever come back, I could go dive deeper into it, but practical sense. Whole life insurance, listen to this, marries a retirement plan with life insurance. And it costs 4 times more on average than just plain old life insurance. And the rate of return is like 2 or 3%. I just showed you where you can make minimum on average 11, but for the last 15 years, it's been averaging 14%. Whole life insurance, neither Dave Ramsey nor myself nor Ellen White would recommend. As a matter of fact, that was the insurance they had back then. Today, they have a new product. It's been around for a long time, but after Ellen White, called term life insurance. For example, I have some term life insurance. And what is it for? Should I die, what happens to my income if I die? It ceases, right? The conference is not going to keep paying my wife, right? So that means that my wife is out of my entire income. And she still then would need to take care of the kids because she would have to work. So my life insurance, while their kids are still under 18, is to replace my income until the kids are 18. That's all it's for. And I have close to $1 million life insurance, and I pay about $100 a month for it. Where whole life insurance would cost me more like $400 to $500 a month. Term runs out once the girls are 18. Why? They're adults now. They can help take care of mom, and mom being a physician, she can pay her own bills. And since we don't have a mortgage, and we don't have car payments, and we don't have any other debt, she'll be fine. And the kids are adults. But now, should something happen to me, she can hire a babysitter. Or she can, perhaps work less so she can be there for the kids. Remember what the Bible tells us. He who does not take care of his own household is worse than an unbeliever and has denied the faith. I have set up provisions to take care of my wife should something happen to me, and we have set up provisions should something happen to her, that I could take care of my kids and continue to work. Listen to what Ellen White says about that. She says, wills should be made in a manner to stand the test of law. After they are drawn, they may remain for years and do no harm. If donations continue to be made from time to time as the cause is needed, death will not come one day sooner, brethren, because you have made your will. In disposing of your property by will to your relatives, be sure that you do not forget God's cause. Here's the part in relating to insurance that I want to bring out. You are his agents, holding his property, and his claims should have your first consideration. Your wife and children, of course, should not be left destitute. Provision should be made for them if they are needy. But do not simply because it is customary bring into your will a long line of relatives who are not needy. That line that says they should not be left destitute. If you have $159,000 in student loan debt, and you have card debt, and you have other debt, and you die without insurance and a will, what have you left your wife? Destitute. Because now she has to carry the burden of the loans herself, all the debt herself that was the mutual debt. And now you've left her without a plan. And so life insurance is a plan to cover their emergencies. Now, once my kids are 18, my house is paid off, I have no debt, do I need life insurance? No. My wife could take care of herself. Plus, our retirement will be in the millions by the time we retire. She doesn't need it. So life insurance is temporary. Term life insurance is temporary. Whereas the whole life industry, they want you to pay that until you die. It's not needed. If the kids are gone, you have no debt, the mortgage is paid off, and you have retirement, why do you need to keep paying life insurance? You don't. Now, some rich people do just to have extra money, but you don't have to. Because ultimately, our life insurance is who? Jesus Christ. Right? But while you're in debt and trying to build for retirement, and your kids are small, you should get life insurance. And if you are married and don't have kids, you should get a will and life insurance if you still have debt. Because let's say you're married with no kids and you have a mortgage and you die, then your wife can pay off the mortgage and not have to worry about that burden by herself. Now she doesn't have to grieve your loss plus have a financial crisis at the same time. See, this is about being good stewards. And Edwin, I'll pick on you because I know you told me you're 18. The younger you are, my first policy when I was a lot younger, I pay $100 a month now. My first policy for close to $1 million. My first policy when I was younger was like $25 a month. So get insurance now as long as you can, term, right? Because you're probably only paying like $30 a month. And you protect your future wife and your future kids. Oh, sorry. Here, now let's go to savings accounts. Is it savings account? No, giving. She says, great spiritual blessings will come to them as they make self-sacrificing efforts to plant the standard of truth in new territory. The money invested in this work will bring rich returns. New converts rejoicing in the light received from the word will in their turn give of their means to carry the light to others. And I put this here at the end. Why? Because even in Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, from the get-go, he tells you to return a faithful tithe and offering. So he's not skimping on that, and neither am I. But what a blessing it is when you can give above and beyond when you're debt-free. And you can see that you're helping people directly. People who may not have employment, people who may not have a job, people who an emergency happened and you help them, right? And to help the cause of Christ. There's a song, unfortunately the singer has apostatized, but Ray Boltz. And the song was about thank you for giving to the Lord. Thank you. I forgot how it goes. Giving to the Lord. Right? And it tells about missionary stories of how you'll meet people in heaven who, because of your generosity, heard the gospel and are there because of your gifts. Right? And these are stories that we won't find out until we're in heaven. And you can't do that when you're burdened with debt. As I mentioned earlier when I said that quote about using your money for noble ends, and the teenager said, see, you got to use it for noble ends. Think about all the good you could do. Not only to missionary work, but to your own family. One of the goals my wife and I have is to provide a scholarship to my nieces and nephew who their parents, unfortunately, aren't following these principles. But I don't want them to suffer for their parents' mistake. But you can do that when you manage God's money His way. And so she talks about giving. And remember the earlier quotes, that money is not just a finance issue, it's a spiritual issue. Perhaps your walk with the Lord, and I say this to myself all the time, could be tighter if we did things His way. But not only in money, right? Because stewardship is not just about money, is in time. And that's the one I'm struggling with the most sometimes, right? You spend 30 minutes doom scrolling on social media, lately he's been watching lions get wildebeest and zebras and stuff. Right? Time management. What about, as we heard from our sister earlier, health and nutrition and stewardship? You know what's the best way to go broke? Medical expenses. Right? You get a big emergency when you get older, and if your insurance doesn't cover it, a heart attack could be a $100,000 surgery. What if we follow the health message? Adventist gets less heart attack, less cancer, less of all the major diseases. Why? Because we do it God's way. Not our way, not my way, God's way. Amen? All right, we're almost done here. Then I'll take some questions. Oh, here's that quote again. Ready? I love it. The desire to accumulate wealth is an original affection of our nature, implanted there by our Heavenly Father for noble ends. This is why I've had an enjoyable conversation with Edwin. He wants to accumulate wealth. I've given him advice, but I've also told him, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. But does God want you to be a millionaire? Yes. Does God want you to be a billionaire? I don't know. That's a lot of money. But He definitely wants you to retire and not have to worry about depending on the government. Remember last year, I think it's September, the government shut down and people weren't getting their welfare checks and their welfare EBT money? You don't want to live like that. And we can do it. And that desire to accumulate wealth is in all of us. I know it, because it's human nature. Implanted there by whom? Our Heavenly Father. But you have to do it for His glory and honor. Not for the Bugatti or 5 houses here and there. No, a nice home, retirement, taking care of your kids, and leaving a legacy. Going back to the wills. My wife and I have a will. And the conference, by the way, will do a will for you for free. They'll even come to your house. The only thing they ask is that you leave them something in your estate when you die. And my wife and I are leaving 10% of our estate to the conference. Right now, though, I got to change it because it's still in the Texas conference. But regardless, it goes to education, 10% is divided between education and evangelism. So if I would change it, 10% of our estate would go to Parkview, and 10% will go to our church for evangelism. You can leave a legacy, and the conference will do a will for you. The will and trust department will come to your house and do it for free. You just got to leave them something. Yeah, but that's when you die, right? Listen to this. It says, money is not necessarily a curse. It is of high value because if rightly appropriated, it can do good in the salvation of souls, in blessing others who are poorer than ourselves. Your tithe and offering, to be more specific, are making a difference that you don't always see. Remember, the tithe doesn't stay in the church. It goes to the conference and then up to the union and then up to the GC and to the GC all over the world. So baptisms in Kenya could have been some of your money because it goes to the GC. Baptisms in California or in Hawaii or in Dominican Republic or in Jamaica or in Aruba or Venezuela or Colombia. The beauty of the Adventist system is that we're a big family. And even though the money may not go there directly, you are supporting your pastor here. You're supporting the baptisms that you have seen here at Central and at other churches. We had a profession of faith here in my church this Sabbath. Right? You are blessing the world. But let's be honest. Tithing becomes harder if you're heavily in debt. Why? Not because you want it to be harder, but because the enemy constantly whispers in your ear. If you kept that extra 10% for you, think how much quicker you can get out of debt. And getting out of debt is a good thing, but look how he's twisting it, right? Oh, look, if you just work for the next 12 Sabbath, you could be out of debt in 6 weeks sooner. And he uses that to try to tempt us. Remember, temptation's not wrong. Our Lord was tempted. But it does weigh on us when we don't trust in God. I end with 2 slides, but I want us to look at this slide. What does this slide say? Very famous in children dedications. Right? It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Without looking it up in your Bible, who can tell me what the next verse is? We say this verse all the time, right? Don't we? All right? We use it all the time. Can anybody tell me what the next verse is without looking it up? All right? Check this out. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Train up a child to live life debt-free. As a matter of fact, in my household, my kids don't get